there, and it shows exactly what we have and what options you could choose from.
Thank you. We got it now.
Nice.
Great.
Chris got it.
We're recording, so keep it tight. Okay, so we'll have some further suggestions for that as we go forward, but keep that in mind. And on our action items, we should just add, CARES reaching out individually to each university to talk about some of the customizations that we're addressing with the larger group today, but we need to make some decisions as a group. Anyway, this homepage changes, that's an example of a customization that, again, it's pretty easy, and I think something that we should do to highlight that we're changing the site, that things are happening, there's something interactive. The second point there under CARES recommendations is search build out, and Troy was sort of alluding to this earlier, but making that engagement form, making the information architecture there a little more robust and a little looser. So adding something like keywords or tags to make that searchable, and having a more robust search that also looks for things like synonyms and allows, youth camps equals summer camps in a search, for example. That's something we feel pretty strongly that we need to do in the coming months. And then the third sort of general bucket of CARES recommendations is having some standards for entering engagements. And Susan, I don't know if you remember these pain points with the first engagement portal for MU, but the time frame question was a difficult one because everything is ongoing, everything is recurring, except when it's not, and when people can't find something that's happening in March because it's an ongoing event. So we all need to sync up around how we treat time frame. And I think for CARES part, what we can do, we have some internal knowledge about how to codify that, and we're looking to make some edits to the form in the coming weeks that will reflect sort of time frame best practices. And we all just need to understand what the output will be for a time frame entered. So CARES can make recommendations and send those around to the team as we talk about entering engagements. But part of the recommendation will be, hey, if you put ongoing time frame and somebody searches the calendar, it's not going to show up, in a block of time in March, for example, should your site have a calendar. Also location. In our original iteration, again, this was just MU, we did a pretty decent job internally of codifying location. So I say location, I mean point location. So somebody could look on a map and see Columbia and see Broadway. Okay, there's a point of a partner for an engagement. I know exactly where they are. But something, again, with entering engagements that was an issue was, where's my engagement? It's in the state of Missouri, anywhere you want it to be. So we need to understand, again, the ramifications of having something too broad, not just in the time frame, but also in the location, and how that will not serve the end user very well. CARES also needs to be aware of any engagements that may need to be, Missouri, may need to have a really broad location, and how we can sort of come to an agreement on what CARES can do to serve those engagements, if that makes sense. Any questions around the time frame or location or?
So for location, I know the challenge was, so there might be initiatives that are available to people across the state, but when somebody was going to look and see, hey, has this been in my community? And then it showed statewide, and it actually hadn't been in, my local community, like the Mules of Missouri. And I wanted to know, because we were able to drill down by county or district, school district, et cetera. And it said that they've been everywhere, but they hadn't. And so those are two things. They could come, so the availability is for them to come. But when you're looking for to see where they've been, that's another question.
Yeah. And that's almost, I think we talked about this a month or two ago, but it's almost another kind of engagement. It's almost a different type. Instead of here's an event that happened or is happening, here's a service that's ongoing or a program that's available. And I don't have a good answer right now other than, well, we'll make the information architecture support it, but how might people be looking for those things, and what is a good way to display program availability versus engagement location? But one of CARE's action items will at least be to codify our form as we develop it. And again, jumping a little bit ahead, we'd like to have our information architecture kind of set up as best as we can for the spring, knowing that things will change, but having any new fields that we're talking about today, like keywords or a more robust location field and a better time frame. We have a time frame in there now, but it's I don't think it's where we need to be. But anyway, for CARE's part, at least we'll be very honest about how things show up and how people need to enter those to get them to search. And this is an evolving thing, and something like location is not going to be solved anytime soon, but we just need to make sure we're honoring what exists with these engagements. Any other thoughts before we get into the weeds around specific engagements, how frequent, how uniform, how we're actually going to proceed? Okay, I'm gonna jump ahead. Feeling the caffeine. Okay, so number 3, decisions before we leave this meeting. And we don't have to be terribly specific, but CARES needs to come away from this meeting understanding what we need to do for the spring and for the summer. So we have to understand, what engagements, what content types we need to support, the frequency of you all entering engagements, the uniformity of engagements. So these little elements are some suggestions by us around a macro story. We sort of talked about that, and to Troy's concern about opening floodgates. Again, a macro story or an initiative might be a good way to get a lot in there without being too disjointed across divisions or across departments. Again, just a suggestion from us, but if there are other ways that people see engagements being entered or under other frames, frameworks, CARE should know, so we can make sure the form and the information architecture supports that. Does that make sense?
So are you wanting perhaps a discussion about what their perception might be at their university, what they're thinking right now?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're thinking right now in regards of how we want this to look. I mean,
what goes in there, the content, the specific engagement content.
Okay, so what I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head here is when someone goes to the engagement portal, they land there, they look. At the top, there's the options of what they can choose from. So I'm picturing options that they could click on: research, events, programs, ways to get connected, services available to you. And so the person could go in and find those. And then throughout each of those, buckets there, within that is the different engagements. So research, for example, we could have our Casey Burton stories and our Casey Canfield and broadband and all of that. And then within events would be our engagement type events that we would host on campus, our expanding your horizons for students, or summer camps, or things like that. And just within each of those buckets have those specified type of engagements. Is that kind of what you're?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because that's what I'm envisioning. How I would see it would look like if somebody came to that page. Someone from the public who knows nothing about campus or how anything works. That's a very simple way to look at those and organize it, I guess.
That's great. Mm-hmm. And that kind of detail helps us to understand, okay, in that form, we need different check boxes. Yes, this is research. Yes, this is program.
Okay.
So we can support that.
And so I'm, thinking about it at that level of what's available. and I was just in another meeting yesterday, and we were talking about like the actual events and activities that we have that are on our calendar. And I know calendars what we're coming up to, but we're already trying to figure out how to feed like the student events and activities into that calendar. I'm just trying to figure out how we're not creating yet another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess some thoughts there are, you know, and I'm going to take the unpopular route here. Maybe this is not the place for that calendar. Or maybe we can sync up with whoever's working on that calendar and figure out how we can push content also into engagemo.org.
Yeah, I think that would make more sense. I have this concern that we'll start missing things, or people will get confused where they should go to look for the information.
Yeah.
If it's a little bit's here and a little bit's there, and so we really want to figure out where is it going to be, and we've made a commitment that we now are making sure that anything that gets entered into that is appropriate for a public calendar into our student calendar actually automatically now gets fed to our main calendar for those type of events. And so I just want to make sure that these two things are going to talk to each other without adding a lot more complexity.
Yeah.
Or perhaps that there's space on the portal that describes what you just said and then links them to where they need to go to find that particular content of interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, mm-hmm.
I know on my end, I have the same concern I had before, which is I don't want to drive people to an external site. So I'm interested in the API. So how can we embed this into our internal MU page as we're building these things? I understand that the substantial commitment was made with CARES, and you guys do great work. So I like the outcome, but I want that API to be able to be embedded within our pages so that people can find what they need coming to our page. Like Patricia said, I don't want people going all over the place. I want them to have one place where they can look and find that. So I'm interested in that part. In terms of what it looks like, I like the idea of having things that are current and things that people can search and find, because there's nothing more frustrating than going to a website and not finding what you need and not feeling like this is for you. And I don't want us to spend a lot of time entering in engagements that people can't actually use. So I'm going to keep going back to that distinction between telling the macro story about the great things we've done and also providing them with current information that on what they can actually access now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to just bring up, so University of Missouri, just to the home page, because I'm trying to understand, Susan, about not linking to an external site. So on the home page here, you have people going right now to give. It takes them to an external URL with the .com on there, secure imdos.com. I mean, on all our websites, there's links to external places that I'm trying to understand what you mean when you say you don't want people to go externally. It's already external. There's so much that goes to other places, and that's part of what a powerful website is. And what we're trying to do is drive people to one place in terms of engagemo.org, just like the .com site and other sites off our main websites. It is a place to land people with a coherent user experience that can be searched in ways that you can't if it's in other ways. So, I continue to push back on, what is native versus linking to these other places.
We can agree to disagree, Chris. I can tell you what I would like to have happen. I can also say that if the decision's made, the decision's made. We're going to work through that. So that's the thing, is that for me, it sounds like a decision's been made, and that's okay. We'll work within that structure. But I need for you to understand that when we're thinking about creating the story of engagement for our campus, I want it to fit within the larger narrative of engagement across the system. But I also want people, when they come to our site, to understand what Mizzou is doing and not be confused by anything else.
We can agree to disagree. Okay.
So a couple things there. Patricia, I have a question, and then Susan, I have a statement. I have a statement. Not like that. Patricia, is there somebody that you could put us in touch with around that calendar so we can at least start having that conversation around the larger calendar? If we could, just basically link to it. And one thought I'm having is the most recent things added, we could display, top 3, and then for more, go see UMSL's calendar.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say Justin Roberts is our guy. That's who I give to for everything, and he'll point you in the direction of the person who is the actual person if it's not him.
Okay.
We have a really small Marcom team. I mean, they're small and stretched, and so like I said, I just never know. So I just go to Justin. Do you know Justin?
I do not know Justin.
Okay, I'll send you his contact information too.
Okay, thank you. And then Susan, in terms of, we don't have any control over Missouri.edu. We have an API that we can expose to a specific URL. So it's not out in the public, but we already have that built. So when you have those conversations with your folks that run Missouri.edu, just let them know that, like, we're prepped and ready for whatever future conversation. That's it. That's my statement.
And also putting them in touch with us, contact actually. Yep. If you have contacts with people that can work with us on the API thing, please give us their names.
Well, I think once Megan has this conversation today with the rest of the communicators, we'll find out more. Our goal right now is to stand up a couple temporary pages that provide information with the goal to make a much larger, more engaged website for the engagement sides. So as they're working through that, I'm sure she'll be in touch with that.
Great. So that kind of brings the calendar question. For me, I'm kind of not lazy. I'm a bit of a procrastinator, and I don't want to make the tech effort, and it's not a large effort, but I don't want to make the effort until the content's there in terms of a calendar. So at least for UMSL, we'll have the discussion about importing some information or just linking and what makes sense with y'all's marketing and communications initiatives. But so the option is there to have a calendar module on the site. Are you doing your time slider thing?
No, oh. I'm just thinking. Go ahead.
Okay.
And I'm not interrupting her. I'm listening.
Thank you, Chris. So if there are any thoughts around that, I'm kind of in a wait and see position. If we have enough information to put into a calendar, we should put one up. But as far as the other MU and S&T, what are you all thinking in terms of content that you would be putting into the portal in the coming months? And does it warrant a calendar? And do you even want a calendar?
Can I reframe the question?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we shouldn't let the technology and the pieces of the calendar and components like the sliding thing get in the way of us working together on what upcoming events there are. Mm-hmm. So in the near term, we can accommodate by having a sticky area or places that are fixed and highlighted on each of your websites to really upcoming events. So it's a shorter term opportunity to really anchor upcoming events without having the calendar and all these other technology underpinnings in place, because we'd like to really engage and communicate with mom and dad and all the folks that are looking at summer camps coming up, this summer. So that's why I want to reframe the question is, let's not let the technology calendaring thing get in the way of focusing on, instead of the floodgates, is what are the upcoming events and things, and we can start there and working with the team to make those highlighted on each site. So did you want to build on that question then, or the question you have?
I think the content should drive whatever the calendar or upcoming event solution. Right. And the content depends on what you all will be entering.
So, and it really plays in well to what Mel is saying around when we get the calendar in place and the slider bar and that stuff, is there'll be some there from events that are going to be happening as the technology is being built. But we'd like to have ahead of time those events in the portal.
So in terms of a calendar, that's something we absolutely have to have. We have a campus calendar, but we don't have one place on our campus where all the upcoming engagements happen. And thinking of it in terms of what's going to go on the portal, I think that's a good place to start. So if we, at least from our perspective, anything that we think is upcoming and current events that are coming up, that would be something that we could put into the portal. I think whatever those things are going to be, if they're accepted into this calendar, they're going to be things we're going to want to highlight. So in terms of figuring out all the things we could possibly put in there and narrowing it down to the beginning, for me, that seems to make sense.
Okay. Makes sense.
I'm still struggling with this one, so sorry. I'm just thinking about all the many things that we have. So we have our Chilo for Performing Arts Center, and we've got events happening there every day. So
yeah,
and they're fantastic, and so we want the community to come to those. We also have small lecture series, and there's just such a variety in there. How do we, I guess, pick and choose? And maybe I'm overthinking this. I don't know.
Well, maybe it's kind of a splitting thing, Patricia, is regarding that performing arts. Maybe it is one card with a statement of there are ongoing events coming, almost daily, different things. And rather than drowning people, is having that card there that can take them to that, like to Allison, what you said is that link to getting into more detail. And that's maybe one example versus other are single big events that you want to highlight just on their own. So it can be both and.
And something that, again, would be cool if the technology exists, at the Performing Arts Center with their website to support this would be, if we had just a single card to say the next event, boom, here's the thing, the next event, boom, just to name it, name the time and the date. And then for more, go to,
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was imagining, and maybe I'm just way not thinking of this in the right way, but my thought is when you go to the engagement portal and you say you click on the performing arts, you have a tile that describes your performing arts theater, but you can click on that and then it takes you to their web page and their, page that lists all of their upcoming engagement opportunities. Not necessarily that on that page we're going to copy and list everything that's already over there on that page. That's kind of how I'm picturing it. It's more of, instead of a place where everything is dumped into, it's more of a tool using to guide people, a central place to come and find what's going on everywhere, and then you click where you want to go and it takes you to that engagement or outreach.
Well, and I think that goes back to the conversation we had about using Engagemo.org to tell the story.
Right.
Because for me, the calendar and having people being able to see all the things that we're doing and find things they want to come to is the most important thing. The stories and the cards, I think what Melanie said is right. We don't have to have a card or a story for every single different engagement, but the School of Music may want to have a card, and then they list, the community arts and the things that they're doing in terms of engagement, their community music lessons, the instrument petting zoo, like all those things that are coming up that they're featuring on their website, but maybe in our calendar events, it doesn't have to be every single one on a card on the engagement portal.
Right. Yeah, right. And there may be things that you, depending on the season, that you do want to lift up and elevate in a different kind of way for calendars. And again, we keep using this example, but it's very compelling, that the whole summer camp thing. January, February, March, parents are looking specifically for that. So for a period of time, that sort of thing, should you choose to do that, or if there's a need at your university, that may be elevated for a seasonal sort of thing.
Yeah, how I would picture that is when you go to the page, maybe the first picture with wording on it says, join us for summer camps, or however you want that. That's your picture and your image, whatever you're wanting to highlight for that week or month or however, and that can be changed. Or it could be, like you said, a carousel rotating, 2 or 3 really pronounced time relevant engagements that you want to highlight. And then still above that is the, the bar where you could select the specific type, but highlight those couple when you first land on the page.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that. Really good. Yeah. I'm gotta make some napkin drawings real quick. Great.
You do.
Yeah. That's how it's gonna stick. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think we have a lot. We're almost to the 10 o'clock, halfway through the meeting. So I guess in terms of calendar, what I'm hearing is we should have something available, at least for the MU portal. And again, whatever we build for any individual portal, we'll be able to replicate. I will get in touch with Justin Roberts and talk about how we might be able to incorporate some live data on the UMSL page. And then Melanie, I noted maybe we'll mock up a carousel or something, but have some sticky, relevant upcoming events. And kind of as we start mocking these up on the dev site, I'd like to share these with the team before we go live and see, I feel like we're going to see a great idea on someone else's site and say, okay, this works for us. I'm a visual person in that respect. If I can see it and understand how it relates to the whole, I'm more comfortable saying yes or no to it.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of CARES technology and what we have to build going forward, I think we have enough information around the calendar
for sure.
aspect.
Yay! Hey, this is a milestone! Yay! Silent cheer.
And it's great input.
Yeah, thank
really
you.
Helps.
So content types, we'd like to support as many as possible, at least in the form, again, for S&T, y'all suggestions, research, events, programs, ways to get connected. We should have an offline conversation about, what that ways to be connected might be. But we want to support all of the content types, and at least for the next few months, be able to capture everything and talk with the individual universities about, okay, we've got 500 things in resources. We have, 7 things in research. I think that would inform what we showcase and where. I might be, again, procrastinating to actually do the technology, and you all might have a better handle on what content types and the amount you have, so push back. But I want to be as flexible as possible and try to just capture as much in the coming months. Does that make sense? So I'm hearing resources. I put resources where we put resources, people, and awards, just some obvious things that came out of the last 2 discussions in addition to engagements. But we're also hearing research, events, and programs. Are there other content types that I'm missing that might be something we can go ahead and launch with? And again, I'll stop talking in a minute, I promise, but we can make very rapid changes to the form if somebody, realizes that we're missing a bucket that we need to capture. And this won't be an either or. We're seeing content types as a checkbox. So it's yes, it's a resource, and it's a person.
So maybe are you asking if they have other suggestions or to be thinking about content type and to begin kind of fleshing out what those buckets might look like based on your university and really what you want to feature?
Thank you.
So the bucket?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, okay. Absolutely.
Okay. I think Melanie spoke a little bit about that. Yeah. And so, it seems like just really thinking through that piece, and I'm guessing you'll get back on that as well with them.
And this is very university specific in terms of how you want to evolve the content types. Is that a fair thing? And you'll have that available across all universities in terms of the form, but it's how you want to customize that further, the awards, the other resources, et cetera.
Keeping in mind, too, one of the things that I think we've all talked about, Marshall speaks to as well, the audience, circling back to the audience and thinking about the buckets related to audience, citizens, consumers, et cetera. That might help drive your thinking a little bit, too.
So we have some additional content types to get us started. So we'll move forward with that, but just know that any suggestions that you have, we'll try to iterate rapidly and get them into the form so that we're codifying things in a way that makes sense for each university.
So I'm looking at this, and I'm looking like at resources, and I'm thinking we have a lot of centers. So centers would be resources, but then the type of resources that they might offer, like whether it be like consulting services or facilitation services or whatever, those are again are resources, but those are like subcategories. And I don't know if there's a way to search for that.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Patricia, as you say that, I was just looking at this. I don't remember why. Somebody asked for something, and the barbershop tour bus. Am I saying that right? Ophthalmology or optometry bus, eye care.
The barbershop. That's the health clinics and the barbershops, and then there's the optometry mobile eye unit. So two different things.
Right. Right. So those as examples of very specific services that are designed specifically for the community, and then how to think about, as you're saying, coalescing all of that, or helping people know about those kinds of opportunities, and then directing them to the different places that they go. I know UMKC has similar sorts of things. MU does as well in terms of the Combs preschool and elder care and things like that. So yeah, those are really fantastic, high visibility, high interest areas. All of those types of things are obviously, or they wouldn't be offered in a continuous way.
And I like what you said about incorporating that into a search. So as we're revamping our search, understanding that folks will be looking for different types of things and how they might be looking for those will be really important. So we should, again, in the engagement, so under resources, we should absolutely have those different subcategories enumerated at this stage. And then as we roll out the search and help people find that content, at least we'll have the architecture there to support that.
So when you talk about a search, the subcategories like we've seen on the Nexus site, they have those containers of future, current, past, in terms of the search time frame. You're saying also the different types of subcategories as well?
Yeah, I do see some kind of federated search in our future. I don't know what that looks like. I think it's going to depend on the content, but it seems that that would be appropriate. Yeah, a similar larger search instead of just the Google one. Yeah.
And I'm wondering, is there based on what you're talking about, the search and the subcategories, is there an optimal amount, or if it gets too long in terms of the categories, is that not a thing?
I guess there's a few different ways to handle that. What I'd like to do as we build out this search engine is we're going to be capturing what people are actually searching for. And so using things like prominence and keyword mapping and relationships between words as sort of hierarchical in what search results come up. But
that
then
defines the category then, is that?
Or the categories may show if that's something that people are looking for a lot, but bringing somebody to a larger search page is sort of the convention now that gives all of the results and then allows them to select different categories or, opt in, opt out of categories.
And I think that we mentioned this at the retreat is, this goes well beyond the Google search engine line there. I think this is going to be really an exciting dimension when this is launched, because it's going to be much more sophisticated to help navigate people to what they want. So, sorry, I'm just asking the geeky techie thing, but it's going to be a big piece.
Yeah. So keep content types in mind as you're entering these things. Again, please be pretty active in letting us know what we're missing. And then time frame decision. So we'd like to, we'll support the capture of everything, but as Chris mentioned, and it sounds like Susan also was pretty interested in capturing events. So things that are very, present, but very near future, or ongoing, or services that are continuously offered. I don't have a good suggestion for that, but I want to make sure that that we're hearing from you guys in terms of what's not there and what we need to capture. Or, Patricia, you had mentioned earlier, sort of the, service available programs, things that are available that might not be encapsulated into a time frame. I just want to make sure, again, that you all know that we're going to try to be pretty responsive, but if there are other concerns right now that we should be thinking about in terms of time frame. It's a difficult question, I know, but do you all have anything in mind as you've been reviewing engagements and putting things into the portal and looking at what content you might put in there that kind of strikes you as something that we haven't been able to codify with our limited time frame, or something that might kind of fall off of the paradigm that we're suggesting, other than the services available that we've already discussed?
As you say that, I'm thinking about timing, rolling out, curating, culling, and systems that you have in place at your universities to help you do that. Sort of I mean, a lot of this is boots on the ground work, making phone calls, searching a little bit, bringing in communications, working with Sam and Mel in terms of the narrative part and all of that. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I want to make sure.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking, and we've been through this. We had version 1, and some of this happened already. So as you're saying what you're saying, I'm also looking at that from a people power perspective that feeds into the timing and timeline and things like that. And if maybe there are best practices that you've come across, something that really helped you systemize how you did this work in version 1, that can be used and further deployed in version 2, that might be also useful for others to hear about.
I think what we didn't have an opportunity to do with version 1, because we had to launch so quickly after those engagements were put in, we can all afford to be messy here. We can be messy on the dev site. I think the key thing is you don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but it's going to be informed by the content. So let's get a little messy together and bring in that input on what you think might be around events, et cetera. And from that may appear a pattern that we want to build or lift up from that. So that's what we have the opportunity now, is to have that holding tank, kind of ruminate through it and improve based on that input.
So one of the things I'm thinking about too is, so we have these different events, and some of these events they're closed events, but we want people to know about them. I mean, because they're pretty cool. But we may have some type of activity that's just for our Jennings and Normandy schools, and we're partnering with, like last year we partnered with them and the NFL Hall of Fame. And we had a big event here around that. And it was pretty splashy, and it was kind of fun. And it was great that we had it on our campus and we were bringing people on. But it was not open to other people. So it was definitely a closed event. But it was pretty awesome. So those are kind of stories that we want to tell. It was, so I think it's important that we're also in some way letting people know that these are things that they can engage in when there's, they can come to the Two Hill, or they can come to this summit that we're having, or, other activities. But then there are some things that we just want to showcase, but they can't come to that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sort of in the news, here's how your university is supporting entities in the community as well.
And see, to me, that's the perfect place for Engagemo.org. That seems like a story, that seems like something that we want to tell, but it's not something that you're going to put into an ongoing engagement portal. It's something that happened. It would be cool if it happened again, but it may not happen again. We want people to know about it. It seemed like that would be a great place to showcase that.
Mm-hmm. Good.
So, Allison, you actually started segueing into the next point there. Another decision that I'd like us to at least start thinking about. Chris said this is going to be a messy process. It will, but as we're entering engagements in the coming months, what is that going to look like? So CARES is definitely here to support and jumpstart, and what Sam had been doing for the October launch. We're happy to continue, at least in the short term, but knowing that this process needs to be sustainable at each university level. How can you all get there? How can we facilitate you all getting there? What does that look like? I know, Melanie, you did a lot of, you've been entering engagements kind of ongoing into the portal, even after the launch. Any thoughts about, since you've been doing that kind of as a shop of one, how has that been going for you? Do you see that as something that is sustainable for you with in your role?
Maybe. I think it would be sustainable for somebody, yes, in this role. Okay, so I'm the only person on our campus that does anything related to this. But in our budget that we submitted to Allison, and in talks, we're thinking of trying to hire a support staff, like a program manager. And in part of that job description that Patricia shared with me, what they are using, I'm thinking that this could be one of their responsibilities, is to enter these engagements into the portal. So yes, definitely something I feel can be managed on our campus, not necessarily by me, but by someone within our umbrella.
I think are you saying the appropriate delegates? I mean, you may be a point person, but it may be other delegates that may be doing this on your behalf, but you're coordinating that?
Correct, yeah. But we're a much smaller campus. And so maybe it's easier for me to say that because we're just smaller. We don't have as much going on as, UMSL or MU. But I feel for me it's totally manageable.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Susan, I know with the initial engagement portal version 0, we had opened that up to, I think, anybody with the Missouri.edu address. And as I remember, it was kind of mixed results. We did have a curator on one side, but there wasn't a lot of communication. For example, when the athletic department was entering in their engagements, there's a lot of discussion, squishy discussion around whether that made sense. But do you have any takeaways from sort of that model of entering engagements, allowing, anybody, department heads entering things and then curating the mass of engagements that we had?
No, there's no way that any one person could have done all that. I mean, you remember what it looked like. So having it open for people to be able to enter engagements, I think would be ideal. I think it gets back to what we want them to do. So we burned a lot of cultural capital compiling that giant database, right? And we put everything there was to be in that database and things that I don't think that needed to be in there. So the question we have would be, I think we have to be very specific about what we want to put in there. I think we have to be very detailed about that. I think we start small and not try to be all things to all people. But again, the question is it an engagement portal where we're putting in all the things that we're doing, or is it a place where we tell stories about the ways that we're engaging with people? I think that's the crux of that decision. Because if I want people to put in the engagements that they're doing, whether it's, summer camps that athletics is doing or something that engineering is running or whatever, then that's a place where people can find open and current opportunities to be engaged with things like the open house. If it's a story about the open house and how we're opening our campus, that's very different. And so not every engagement is going to look shiny and beautiful like the cards we see on the engagement portal right now. So I think we have to think about what is it we want to highlight in what place, and then what do we need from each person to make that happen. So on your end, like I'm looking at the engagement portal, is it a form that they put in and then they have to put in all this information? So they have to put a big image and a caption. Do they have to do they tell the story for us so that all you have to do is go in and make sure that it has all the pieces and then it can go on the web? So I'm just thinking through what would we want to go here? What would they need to put in? And what would be at the minimum that standard thing that you would want everybody to have to upload in order for it to be able to be seen?
You know, that's interesting, Susan. I think, you know, based on what you've said in terms of a calendar as a priority, that sort of thing seems like it would definitely be a focus for MU. Maybe the storytelling part, which also gets at impact, are not things perhaps that is open for anybody to try and populate. Maybe that comes after the fact with hand-picked sorts of stories that the communications department might be aware of, you might be aware of, that then shows the larger impact of a few of the engagements that might appear on the calendar or not, you know, just maybe a both and, but one is set up for being populated perhaps based on a calendar sort of thing, activities, events, that sort of thing, with honed in expectations about what that might look like. And then another side of it is this showing of impact, and that content is curated in an entirely different kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Susan, gosh, what you framed is really, really good, because the strength of what we had with version 0, which was for S&T and so that was the MU, the first starting prototype, is that it was a very distributed model and anybody could enter in. The problem is there wasn't clarity on what to enter in, and we don't want to waste people's time when you've got a curated approach to elevate it. Maybe it is, Allison, a both and, providing an opportunity for anybody to enter in at one level with more guardrails around what it is to be entered and why. Mm-hmm. Provide that as kind of the feeding ground for stories then to be highlighted based on that broad pool. It helps faculty and staff understand the role of engagement, and they have a voice mm-hmm. in that. Mm-hmm. But then also at the higher level, what do we want to do around telling the story? It's just picking from those pieces, mm-hmm. so people won't feel like they haven't wasted time. They're just at one level of. Mm-hmm. It's like going to the CNN newsfeed. You read a bunch of headlines, but then you may want to click on something to drill deeper. The headlines are the stories, and then if you want to drill in deeper, it's the individual faculty and staff's contributions to it. So I just, you know, Susan, you really got me to thinking from a sustainability standpoint. It can't be with the people on this call here only. Mm-hmm. There's a role for that for curation, elevating to what you said, Allison, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of throwing that out there as, you know, going back to a component of version 0, but with being really better at communicating what it is and what we want. Mm-hmm. So I'll stop there. Mm-hmm. It just
to the people that provide input. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is that Marshall talked a little bit in our meeting yesterday about wanting to do some kind of annual mini reports on system engagement. It seems to me like, again, Engagemo is that place where we tell that story as a collective whole, and that would be a place where we could highlight those things. And we've already mm-hmm. been highlighting them and tagging them in terms of the 3 grand challenges. It's also an opportunity for us to highlight the work we're doing in broadband and to highlight the work we're doing on workforce development with the engagement weeks. So I feel like, for me, that's that place. I mean, if I want to know how the system is engaging with Missourians and making their lives better, engagemo.org seems like a place to do that. I don't know if we want to get into the weeds of putting everything that everybody does and trying to figure that out within that portal.
Yeah. And maybe just demoted. It depends on, you know, how we elevate that. I mean, if people are contributing and there's something that an engagement leader sees that I didn't know this was happening, you can lift that to a story. And from an end user, maybe it's just an internal pool. Maybe all of the faculty and staff, only it's the university inward looking can look at that. And then the outward part is these stories mm-hmm. to make it really nice and thin. But it's a sustainability thing, that yeah. contribution. So,
yeah.
So I guess in, actionable items in the short term, Susan, if there are folks that we should open up this portal to enter things, let us know as those people cross your mind or cross your path. So we'll make sure that they have access and, are included in any discussions or documentation around how to do this, at least from a technical perspective.
So I guess the question for me is, I don't want to ask anybody to put anything into the portal until we know what the portal is supposed to do. That's particularly sensitive on our campus because we had people put a bunch of stuff in, and I want it to look different. I also think our engagement council can help us think through this and what that looks like.
Okay.
We can highlight more great engagement stories. Like that's a thing. We have more that we could tell. We can put them up there. That's not a problem. I think the bigger question is, what is it that we're trying to tell as a system, and what will the portal look like, and what information do I need to ask them to do? What does the interface look like? What are they going to have to put in there, and where will that actually go, and what will we do with it?
Mm-hmm. So I think, again, going back to audience, when we talk about local citizens and how they can engage, as you said, as we've all said, understanding what engagement is and seeing what that looks like is great. But I think it's that elevating of how they can connect actionable things that they can do that connect, which potentially gets back to, Susan, what you've also identified in others in terms of calendaring and opportunities to do that. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I'm just reiterating things that we've all said, that Marshall has said as well, that might help drive, at least at a high level, where we go with this. Of course, details in terms of fleshing that out further, but I don't know if that helps at this point, or if that's a specific follow-up with MU as this unfolds. I'm not sure. Thoughts, anyone?
I think for me, I'd like to get our engagement pages up first, so that we have the beginnings of something on our website, so that people can see that. And then I'd like for us to, as we make decisions about what comes next, I'd like to roll that out all together, so that our people aren't getting many different messages.
Seems very fair. Yeah. Do you know a timeline on that, Susan?
We'll know more once Megan is done talking to them. I think that the short-term pages will be up fairly quickly. We're only talking about 4 internal pages that highlight some things. We don't have our next engagement council meeting until a couple of weeks from now. So it'll be a good time for us to sit and kind of have that discussion with them.
Great.
Okay. And I guess similarly, so I don't know that Carl has access right now. Will he be sort of the point person on entering these things, or at least curating them? What are your thoughts around this?
No. Actually, we're in the process of making a hire right now. So we've got interviews going on this week to have a project manager to work with us on this. And we have web pages already, but they really need to be developed and become more robust. And so we'll link all of this to that page, to those pages.
Okay. Great.
That doesn't mean Carl shouldn't have access to put some things in, though. I'm not so. Okay. But he won't be the person responsible for it.
Okay. We'll make sure he has access, at least in the short term, so he is familiar and can feel comfortable reaching out to us and asking any questions around the form as we start making changes. So the last decision before we leave this meeting, and this is, we put comms plan, like we're going to make that decision, but at least in terms of, I'll offer this up. it's not necessarily a question, but CARES is open to making whatever changes we need to that align with your communications plan. So whether that's, again, at the form level or whether that's at the website level, we need to take, as you were saying, we need to make these language changes and it really belongs here or it doesn't belong there, or we should leave it at the top and have, our communications narrative there. CARES, we want to be responsive, but yeah, that's my statement there. Is there anything that we can do to help facilitate those conversations? I don't know that we should be involved in them, but what do you all think about CARES involvement in those conversations with your communications folks? At least around those two items that Allison was talking about before. One is, marketing Engagemo.org in the larger constellation and as its, own piece. And then how Engagemo interacts with those individual university sites. How can CARES be involved to help those conversations, or how should we be involved?
I think we have to figure out what we want to do and then bring you into the conversation to see what's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and so I provided, I sent Justin's information to you. And so when we're putting anything out that has UMSL associated, they should just be aware that there's a link, there's our logo, and so that they have a chance to review it, because they see things that I'm not going to see because I'm much more of a text kind of person. But they're looking at like the whole alignment.
Okay.
One of the things too, that if this is helpful, this seems like how we've moved in terms of communications with other projects that relate to the 4 universities is Kelly Weeman at the System Office of Communications can work with maybe helping develop some sort of system macro communication about how to get the word out about the engagement portals or some sort of piece that then she, in the past, as we work with other things, will communicate also with your communications units at your universities, and then there can be further customization at universities. And so that may be something. I guess my question is, and we've talked about this before, should we bring Kelly into this to say, again, at that marketing of the Engagemo.org level, have Kelly do some thinking on that, and then ask her to work with you and your communications department, and then again, customization from there for your universities? Is that the approach that we want to take? And if so, I can bring Kelly into this at this point. So let me know what you think about that.
What would she exactly do for us?
She, in the past, has created overarching narrative about, in this case, it would be the engagement portals, putting a system logo on it, identifying within a template places for universities to individualize it as well, and just creating some of that standard language about how to market the portals, from which the universities could take that template and tweak, for their own ways. And so that could come in the form of social media blips or something like that to push out. It could come in the form of, I don't even know what else, but maybe a brief flyer or something like that. Just common language, maybe.
I think it'd be great if she did that for the Engagemo.org site. I mean, I think that's the beauty of that, would be from the system perspective, telling the story of what we're doing to engage Missourians and the world. So any kind of social media pushing out great things from system is always good. I know Megan's going to continue to do that for us and our campus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that occurred to me, currently on the engagement portal, there's a big brand new change that we really haven't even pushed out. Mm-hmm. And that big brand new change is the embeddedness of the district data sheets and the impact area. Brand new district data sheets that came out in 2020, and those have been integrated into the engagement portals, but we haven't really told anybody that, right? So, you know, what are those overarching same things that are happening across the 4 universities related to the engagement portals that maybe we could ask system to take the lead on in terms of messaging and then again tweaking. So that's just one example that, you know, we haven't told anybody that that's there, that updated information.
Did you all know?
And I know Dusty at system level is working with those new district data sheets with legislators, and that's the information that they're going to be using in Jeff City.
I knew because I just went to the engagement portal page and saw it at the top. I guess to me, this is the bigger question about this, is that it seems like we're trying to make 2 things fit in one box. We want to be able to communicate with our legislators, particularly with the district data sheets and our stakeholders about what we're doing. But then we're also trying to give them a place where they can do actionable things. And I think that for me is where the disconnect comes. I see the value of the communicating what we're doing. Like I get that 100%. It's all about that. And that's really important. And I think that's a system role. I think where I get bogged down is in how that then translates into the actionable things that we want to highlight for each campus.
Susan, I hear you. Amen. Because we've been struggling with that very thing you're talking about. Is it a lumping thing or a splitting thing? Is the impact and what we're doing around that a standalone thing, or is it right now on the engagement site, you have to scroll down to almost the very bottom and you don't even know it's an interactive mapping by legislative district. You don't even know, but there's just a bunch of words there. You have to click on it to see it. So I would like to see for our team is some resolution on what we want to do with that, because there is that disconnect. I think it is too buried. We don't have a solution other than we would love to hear what you all think. And yeah, we're struggling with this. So if you go to, for example, hold on here, I'm trying to get the engagement portal. I know you see it.
No.
Yeah, I'm doing it. Okay. Bear with me. Engagement rings. That's why we don't want it.
Nope. That's the dev site.
I know, but
You're there. You got it.
That's the development site.
there it is. Okay. So when we're scrolling down at the very top, we have a bunch of words. Then we have featured engagements. Then we go to each university portal. And then at the very bottom, we've got this thing called impact with a bunch of words. You don't know what you can really do. And only after you click in there, do you get to, Susan, what you're talking about. I mean, this is something that in its own right, when you click on a Senate district and being able to bring us updated data, whether it's county councils, et cetera, this is a product on its own. In some ways. So I wanted to go through the flow of that just to underscore how buried it is and how difficult, even if we communicated it, for people to find it. So I'll pause it.
There's a different audience.
But that's the thing too, that's again, the totally different audience, but not a different audience if you're talking about storytelling. It's a different audience in that they're going there to learn about what we're doing and the impact we have there versus some of them may be going to find out what activities are happening on campus, but most of them are not doing that. They're going for a different reason.
Well, you know, and again, I don't know, just throwing out a thought, you know, maybe this becomes a card and another launch off place. You know, are you a card that says something to the effect of the footprint of the UM system and what that might look like, and then the jumping off point leads to the district data sheet information. I don't know, but I think one of the things
that Kelly might be able to do is to look at this overarching introductory information and talk about that.
Right. That's interesting that you say that, because we talked yesterday about currently on the engagement portal, the flow. And if, the flow doesn't probably make sense to the average citizen, how things are arranged and the transition from one section to the next. And then, as you just said, maybe having somebody from communications take a look at it and helping us rethink that, or at least transition statements or something that sort of provide the flow or the guidance of here's what we're featuring next and why, and here's who it's for, perhaps.
Well, the other thing too is that I think that there's no the words engagement portal don't mean anything to anyone outside this conversation.
Yeah.
So if we send a stakeholder to that, they don't know what that means.
Right. That's a good point.
Right?
Yeah.
I just think you need to think about the framing of this so that when people come to it, they know what they're getting. And I think that's if we were going to fix this, not that it's broken, but fix it, would be thinking about what is the purpose of this site? What does it do? What is it intended to do? And what should it do? And how do we communicate that to people with whom it matters?
Mm-hmm.
Patricia, Melanie, I mean, this conversation, about placement impact versus the engagement stuff, all of this up above is consistent. Then when we get down to here, we're on impact, it's its own thing. And then we've got this stuff here, which are other tangential resources, but does it live here, or is it, for example, on All Things Missouri, we can have all those pieces in there in that place. Thoughts?
I don't really have any thoughts at this time. I honestly have information overloaded and trying to sort it all out, because after just listening to what Susan said, that made a whole lot of sense to me, and just trying to understand, wrap my head around what the purpose is as well. Because like she said, we're the only ones that know what an engagement portal is. So are we wanting to develop this into a tool that we use to promote to community members to use?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm just thinking. So I don't really have any comments, anything good or thoughts. I'm just thinking. So sorry.
And I didn't say that to stop your thinking or your conversation. I do think, though, again, based on what we talked about at the retreat, what Marshall is very clear about is that the audience is local citizens. That is the audience. And local citizens, and that's a huge audience. I mean, again, it's mom and dad, it's potentially a legislator. So, based on that, I think maybe what we need to think about or look at is how we portray that based on the assets that we have at each university, and then bring in people from communications that can help us manage it within these sites, and how it's featured, and the transitions, and what's going to make the most sense to people, even what it's named, perhaps.
I think the other thing, too, to think about is that what is forward-facing to the public and what is going on in the background can be two different things, which is why I come back to the API, because I think that there's benefit to us having a searchable database of upcoming activities and programming that people can see across the system, that we particularly can see across the system. But I also think that for me, would be useful to have an embedded API in my site that is pre-sorted just for MU, so that when people come to our site, it's the same back end things that are happening, but they're seeing it for our campus. And there may be a link that says, hey, you want to see what else is going on across the UM system? Click here, and it takes them into a bigger, deeper site. I just think that we're trying to make this into all things for all people, and there could be different things for different audiences and for different purposes. That still gets to Marshall's point, which was always for the people of Missouri to see what's going on, but also for us to be able to see across, particularly at the beginning, our campus and across the system where everybody's working, so we're not on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a different thing that's related to this, but doesn't have to be the engagement portal page.
Yeah. You know, thanks, Susan. Patricia, any thoughts? Because we're going to bring this to communications, and we want to loop back to you all on what we heard communications say. So we're just making sure that, you know, this conversation doesn't end here, because everything that's being said is so important. So just know that we're going to be looping back with you all. But Patricia, did you have anything to add to this piece?
Yeah, so I'm just going to go back to that question earlier. I'll be honest with you, I just never got down to the very bottom where it said resources in looking at it, because it's like you keep scrolling to get down there. So I didn't even know they were on there. I think the impact report, you know, you've got that link right up there on the right-hand side. And I think that the impact report actually should stay on this portal. I like that people can see, oh, this is where these universities are. But as I'm kind of just scrolling through, the other thing I liked at the top is that we had all 4 of our universities, and there are links there. They link to the impact portals for each of the universities. And then you've got your featured engagements. But then as you scroll down, I mean, you can't see all 4 universities without scrolling a lot. So stops there. It's like, obviously, I'm University of Missouri, St. Louis. I have to scroll down to find us. So I think placement is important too.
Are these, does this take you to each campus, right?
Yeah.
So if we go to UMSL here.
Yeah, you can go to each of the featured engagements, which is nice because it's right there. You can hover over it and you can see. So I guess you can go there, but then when you get to that page, we also want to make sure that people can then quickly and easily get to our individual websites, or, you know, our home websites, our university websites too, in an easy way where there's that other information. So I want to drive people that way as well.
Yeah. Good. That's good. Okay.
So as Chris said, I think it seems like the next step is pretty quick, is working with communications to do a deeper dive. They're aware of it. They've seen the site. They've promoted it during engagement week, but sort of a deeper look at that, a more dissected look at that.
And we'll bring to the communications group your comments and what we talked about today. So we just want to make sure nothing gets lost as we go around and around with this, because it's been a tough nut to crack in terms of impact report and where that lives and how.
Sure. So we're got about 15 minutes left, and I, you know, in light of our discussion, I do think these action items are still, yeah, absolutely. So at least for CARES, we're absolutely going to be doing these things in the coming weeks. Revamping that intake form to better capture time based on our discussion today and some best practices as we've been doing research since we launched this, especially since version 0. I think we've learned a lot. That second, we'll alter the architecture and the form to support those new content types that we discussed today. Again, with those top 2 things, please be in communication with us if something's working, something isn't working, so we can rapidly enter new content types and have those available in the form, or whatever, you know, work through some pain points. And also some standards for entering engagements. Those will be written somewhere, which would be a lovely segue into the document repository that does exist on engagemo.org. However, because of our snow days, there is a piece of it that I need to finish up. So I'm hoping in the next couple of days to email everybody on the team and say, hey, here's the document repository that we talked about in the retreat, which will include, when we get there, standards for entering engagements, a living document there. Allison's provided a number of documents to go in that repository, again, on engagemo.org. If you go there now and log in, you'll see add engagement, edit engagement, docs, and I think there's a profile setting. But it looks terrible, and there's a crucial functionality piece that's missing. Anyway, I'll let the team know when that's available. That will be this week. And then for the engagement leads.
Just to round out, this is instead of having a box folder where you have to actually go to every file to open up the file to see what the file means. This repository is a better way to really sort through all these documents with some little content that tells you what it's about on the website, and it's just limited to the leadership group.
This is what we talked about at the retreat, having that place. So this is a follow-up from that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then our proposed action items, again, pushback. This is what we saw the engagement leads sort of doing from here on out. You know, one should be, it's number 5 there, but having those communication plans and those folks integrated, you know, identifying personnel for ongoing engagement, wrangling, you know, in the short term, again, if CARES can take some of that, please let us know. And we'll do our best to fit that in with content that you all identify. So number 2 there, engagements identified in the coming months, what needs to go in there, what doesn't, content types identified, and then any initiatives and macro stories. So something I've been thinking about in this conversation is telling that bigger story. And again, punting on those big decisions, the information architecture should support, for example, initiatives. We'll probably call them something like categories, but if you're putting in an engagement, what I would like to do in the coming weeks is make the form a little more responsive to you all entering categories on the fly. So I don't want to have to deal with it. You know, we should not be the holders of that information. The form should say, hey, what's the category for this? You know, enter a new one and identify the categories that you've already entered. So at least we can start lumping these engagements together for the larger stories. And other content types like the resources, if we can start categorizing those around, you know, whatever engagement initiative strategies or whatever you all come up with. Once those things are categorized, we can lift up that content to exist not only in an engagements or featured engagements page or in a slider, but in its own page. So here's an initiative, and I think I brought up iCare again, because I'm not very creative that way, but here's a page around what UMSL's doing in relation to iCare. Here's some engagements. Here's a bucket for, you know, some written content, and here are some resources all around one macro story or initiative. That's sort of the end goal, but getting there, what CARES will do is make that form responsive to that. So anyway, long story short, please start thinking about those categories and entering those into the form as it makes sense to. And we will, I'm sure, have a big shiny email in the coming weeks when the form starts getting, when the form is in a place that's responsive to the conversation that we've had today. So talking about things like keywords, location, better time frame, and then these categories, having a space where you all can sort of organically put those in the form without us having to identify, here's, you know, like, for example, the grand challenges are static. They'll live on every form, but the categories should be specific to UMSL. And as you all are going through and putting in engagements, you should be able to add those categories dynamically. So long story short, just some things to think about there. Are there other things that CARE should be thinking about at this point? Some action items that I've missed as we're going into the nebulous future?
The messy future.
The messy future. Okay. And so our proposed timeline, again, at least from the CARE side, we want to support you all with technology as we can. Spring, we'd like to make some of those homepage changes we talked about. And as we work, since we're not pushing for a launch date set by somebody else, we typically stand things up on our development site, show them to our stakeholders, which is you all, get sign off, and then launch them on the live site. Usually on a weekend, sometimes it's just an evening in the middle of the week, especially if it's not a high profile site, which this isn't at this time.
So what would be the protocol? Would we have to meet on a Zoom meeting to get approval? What is sign off? I just want to make this as few barriers as possible. Is it an email saying, if you don't have any issues with this site on the development site, the changes we've made, we don't hear from you within the next 24, 48 hours, we will push them out and make them live. I want to make sure that we're not all constraining each other because we're all very busy. Suggestions?
That's a great question. And I'll answer that from my thinking is if there are things system-wide, we should bring everyone in on an email to say, okay, this is where we are with the form, something in the back end that may not need a public launch or sign off, but we'll make you all aware of the changes. And if anything happens at a portal level, I think notifying the engagement lead, this is where we are. But I think in terms of sign off, it'll depend on what the thing is. So if we're making homepage changes, that top change, we will need sign off from somebody, and we'll try to be pretty transparent about that.
Okay.
But if it's a small change in the back end or,
Okay. I just don't want, because, setting up a time to meet or get this, what you said is great. Sounds good. And for you all, what do you think? Anything different in terms of process approach?
I think we can work along those lines. And then if we have challenges as we move forward, we can say, hey, let's in the future do it a different way. I mean, I think we can be flexible.
Yeah. Great.
Sounds great.
So for spring, we're hoping to get those homepage changes made, and that will be a sign-off thing. The search will be added, likely not be a sign-off thing. We'll have to do a lot of testing in-house to see how that rolls out and evolves. The search will be an evolutionary thing. It will be pretty basic at first, but then as we get more content in there and as our search engine becomes more robust because of that content, we will open up the search to be more faceted as we get there. The asset map, that was just a suggestion. That's something that can be added. I think that we need to talk individually to each university to talk about what changes we want to see on each portal. Yeah, and then for the spring, we'll have, again, in a few weeks, that internal form, those architecture changes that I made, that I mentioned throughout this meeting. And then in summer, we would like to launch the new modules as we come up with those. So the calendar, it sounds like that's a pretty big one. Any initiative pages, again, as the content dictates, if you all are in there, and maybe we won't have any initiatives that warrant their own pages, but something to consider. That's not a heavy lift on CARE's part. I think that would be something that would be a really good low-hanging fruit to present for the reasons I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. And then other content types displayed, featured, searchable as we get there. Any thoughts on that timeline? Any concerns? Things I'm not considering or missing? So an immediate next step for CARES, just to keep this ball rolling, is probably in about 3 weeks, we'll get in touch with everybody and let you know about the information architecture changes. That just means the form, how the form has changed, and to check it out, when you can, and enter things, or let us know what we need to start looking for as we can support the entering of engagements. So that's sort of the next thing that we have on our timeline. The next big communication. And then you all will be in touch around the comms meeting that you'll have? Okay, yeah, great.
Which we're going to need to transition to here now to walk over there. And we've got this recorded. I guess we'll let Troy know.
Yeah, share that with Troy. Yeah, I want to say thank you so much to all of you. I know this has been a long iteration, and it's when we're trying to work with 4 different, very unique entities and make some alignments where possible, and learning and the technology, this is new space, and I just really appreciate everybody's time and heavy thinking and heavy lifting to move forward. Are people clear? Is everybody clear what to do next? I suppose I think maybe the next big piece, it seems, for the universities is for the form that you're creating.
Yep, the changes. Yep.
Right, the changes, and then that will kind of help drive some other things. So again, thank you so much to CARES and all of you. Great work.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be in touch soon.
Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.